Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're on the cold side of the country this week. Welcome to the January 21st, 2026 edition of On Track Live. Appreciate everybody joining us here. Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. We're just I'll do a little shameless self-promotion at the end of the call here. We've got a couple of special guests with us today that we'd like to get right into the discussion, and afterwards we'll have a little bit of Q&A, and then I'll give you a little bit of information on our upcoming spring and O&M conferences that registration is now open for. But just to dive right in, I'm really excited about this week's or this month's topic. We've got as guest with us today from America's Power, Michelle Bloodworth, who is President and CEO of America's Power, and Paul Bailey, who is the policy expert on staff at America's Power. Both of these folks, Michelle and Paul, have deep backgrounds in several facets of the energy industry, and America's Power is probably the premier organization that's working nationwide, both at the federal and state level, to support the coal fleet and its associated industries. They recently commissioned a study from Energy Ventures Analysis, very highly qualified data analytics firm that covers the energy industry, on what the true cost of renewables replacing baseload coal generation is. And really appreciate them coming on the program today to talk to us about the results of that report and give us an overview on that report. And I've got chat box open. If you have questions along the way, feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll do a little Q&A at the end of the presentation here. At that point, we can either take questions from the chat, or you can unmute yourself, do the wavy handy thingy or whatever to join the conversation. But with that, I'd like to first turn the time over to Michelle to give a couple of opening remarks, and then Michelle can pitch it to Paul to present to us the results of this new report. So, Michelle, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, John, thank you so much. I know we have some joint members, so Paul and I really appreciated the invitation to speak with you all today. We do really appreciate your leadership and the years of collaboration we've had with NCTA. It certainly has made a difference, and thank you again for your leadership. Last Thursday, you all probably know that John and I had the opportunity to attend the first meeting of the National Coal Council, and certainly congratulations, John, on your nomination as well. The reestablishment of the National Coal Council and the discussion that we had with Secretary Wright, Burgum, representatives from the White House and others from the administration, it really was a great day for our industry, as both Secretary Burgum and Wright really talked about in a very strong way how coal remains a fundamental component of America's energy strategy. And they told reporters without coal, this country would not be able to win the race on AI, and also just stress the importance of technology innovation. We did discuss with both of the secretaries, how obviously the recommendations from this group, we feel like, and they feel like, will be instrumental toward their efforts to modernize and also to extend the life of our existing coal assets. They also talked about supporting the growth of new power generation. It's going to be a focus on exports and also product manufacturing. We do believe, this effort will certainly place more emphasis on the importance of coal and policies that are needed to ensure the health of the coal fleet, but also its supply chain, of which certainly transportation is a critical component. We intend to work certainly actively with John and others on the National Coal Council to ensure that all of the policies they discussed are implemented, so we have a lot of work to do. Paul and I have had, and our members, numerous meetings with this administration, with the Department of Energy, to really stress the importance of utilities investing in their coal plants. We have a lot of members who said, hey, uncertainty with EPA regulations, uncertainty in market rules. They really haven't made the investments. And so we were very pleased that DOE is offering. This is just tranche one of about $625 million in grants. There's also certainly a large bucket of loan guarantees. Many of the first tranche of those projects, there's about 5 different categories. Those will be announced fairly soon, or at least the beginning of February. The other thing we had the opportunity to talk to Secretary Wright in advance of the meeting is opportunities to increase capacity factors of coal plants. They're very interested in that. We did provide them with 10 policy recommendations that the administration, some of those are DOE, some of those are FERC, some of those are tools that the administration or different agencies would have to support the coal fleet. And even though, there's probably some on the call who have been impacted by the Department of Energy's emergency orders, the 202Cs. And even though we're appreciative, obviously none of us want a reliability crisis. That doesn't really increase the capacity factor of coal plants. And so we talked about the need to have longer term solutions, which certainly Secretary Burgum and Secretary Wright have both agreed, as well as the White House. And so we're hoping that certainly as we look to 2026, that the Department of Energy wouldn't have to use as many 202Cs because we would be able to have longer term solutions. As many of you know, certainly the utilities on the phone, the biggest challenge to the coal fleet is EPA regulations. There are 7 regulations that severely impact the coal fleet. This is going to be an important year to work with the AGs to defend EPA's rules. Certainly there's going to be a lot of litigation because EPA is obviously working expeditiously to finalize many of those 7 rules. And then lastly, we did have an opportunity while our members were in town to meet with the chairman of FERC. She asked great questions. And really we were talking to her about recommendations we had to develop policies for coal plants to serve large load. Obviously with all the data center growth, we want to make sure that coal has a level playing field because data centers are a perfect load for coal. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who John said leads a lot of our policy work and analysis. And he's going to discuss our recent report, which shows how it's less expensive to continue operating retiring coal plants rather than replacing them with new renewable power sources. It doesn't mean that we don't support an all of the above, but the all of the above does include coal. So with that, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So the first slide, good afternoon, I should have said. So the first slide on the screen is what the cover of the report looks like. You can find this on our website. It's not a very long report. I should tell you at the outset that the math behind the results I'm going to show you gets a little tedious. So if you have any math questions, it's probably best to just follow up with us after the call here, and we'll do our best to answer. So as Michelle said, you're all aware of this debate about discussion, concern about affordability. And for longer than that, there's been an argument about how inexpensive renewables might be, especially relative to other sources of electricity, particularly dispatchable baseload sources like coal. So we set about to take a look at comparing how much it would cost to keep a set of retiring coal plants running versus shutting those coal plants down and replacing them with new renewables. And we looked at 6 combinations of renewables, which I'll get into in just a minute. The other thing that's going on, to give you a little context, well, let me go to the next slide. So this is the retirement situation nationwide right now. What's replacing this coal over the next 5 or so years? There are almost 300 gigawatts of new generation that's in various queues, particularly ISO RTO queues. And more than 90% of that is renewables. a little bit gas, but it's actually very little gas. So you basically got mostly renewables replacing all this coal plus the other dispatchable resources that might be retiring. So the first bullet there, the coal fleet right now is about 170,000 megawatts. At its peak, it was about 315,000 megawatts. This was about 15 years ago. So right now, these are coal retirements that we track. We started tracking these a long, long time ago. And as you know, the numbers increased. So the first bullet are coal retirements over the 10-year period you see there, last year on through 2034. So that 90,500, that's a little more than half the coal fleet right now that it's announced plans to retire. There are a number of, I call them unretirements, or a number of retirements that have been deferred, a fairly high number, and we expect more retirement deferments, partly because of the administration, partly because of load growth, that sort of thing. The second bullet is the one that we have stressed a lot when we have been talking to people in administration and on the Hill. You know, we have a real crunch here in the next 5 or so years with load growth and retirements. So we're about to lose basically about a third of the coal fleet within a period of 5 years, unless policies change and incentives are provided to the coal fleet. So there's a lot of coal that is announced plans to retire. That doesn't mean that all of that coal will retire, but there's a lot of it that's seriously thinking about retiring. We've broken it down by ISO RTO region because Michelle mentioned FERC. We spend a lot of time talking to these grid operators, MISO, PJM, Southwest Power Pool, ERCOT. We don't talk to ISO New England much, but anyhow, we spend a lot of time talking, particularly MISO, PJM, and SPP, because that's where actually most of the coal fleet is. About 60% of the coal fleet is in these wholesale markets. So that's why we spend a lot of time there trying to get them to adopt rules that value the reliability attributes of coal. So if you look at MISO there, that's about that's a little, well, if you look at the column of 25, 29, the next 5 years, again, we're concerned about 10 years. We're more concerned about 5 years right now. So that's about a third of MISO's coal fleet that's going to retire over the next 5 years. That 15,000 for PJM is about a third of PJM's coal fleet. And I think a lot of people listening to this understand all the load growth challenges that PJM has right now. SPP, that's a smaller percentage of SPP's fleet. Their fleet's about 20,000 megawatts of coal. But SPP has a lot of data center growth also in their state. So they're challenged by these retirements also. And you see ERCOT. ERCOT's got a lot of renewables and a lot of gas, not very much coal. That ISO New England's one plant there. Now, one of the things that's important about all these retirements is these are regions that NERC says are at elevated risk of electricity shortages during this 5-year period. So on the one hand, you have electricity shortages, the possibility of that, you have load growth, and you have all these retirements. And that's why the former chairman of FERC talked about why we're facing an electricity crisis right now. John, do you want me to stop after each slide and see if there are questions? You want to wait until the end? I can do either one.
We can do it either way, folks. If you've got questions, feel free to jump in there or type a message into the chat box. If you're shy, and I can interrupt Paul and shoot it in there. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to shoot them out as we go here. I don't see any right now though, Paul. So you can probably keep going. So.
All right, I'll proceed apace here then. All right, these are some of the inputs, not all of them, to the EVA analysis. Again, I'm going to get to the results in a minute. EVA was very transparent about the assumptions. I'm sure people can argue about them, but at least people know where the numbers came from and the assumptions. So one of the key inputs was the amount of electricity that's generated by these retiring coal units. Not all of them on that slide you saw. EVA used about 42 gigawatts of retiring coal, 41.7 to be precise. So that was the universe of coal units they were looking at. How much does it cost to keep those coal plants running versus replacing that, well, I'll call it 42 gigawatts of coal with these different combinations of renewables. So the amount of electricity generated by those retiring units, and this was well, then EVA looked at capacity factors for different electricity sources in the past 4 winter storms. I mean, the winter storms are key to this because that's when the grid is under greatest stress. That also happens to be when renewables are challenged, particularly solar, and also their problems delivering gas sometimes also. The capacity factors, I don't have them in a slide here, but you might be interested in this. During the last 4 winter storms, the Uri, Elliott, and their 2 polar vortexes, the coal fleet's capacity factor averaged across those 4 winter storms, averaged almost 80%, which is pretty damn good. Gas was 61%, so let's call gas 60%. So coal outperformed gas. Wind, because you tend to get a lot of wind during these winter storms. Wind capacity factor on wind was 38%, which is about what it is on wind during the year anyhow. And solar was 6%. So if you were leaning on solar a lot during these storms, you were in trouble. So those are the capacity factors that EVA used. The next one, effective load carrying capability. I call those capacity values for shorthand, but this is what the grid operators use to show how dependable a resource is when electricity demand peaks. They sometimes say when the system is under maximum stress. So this is a measured dependability is what it is. The only thing higher than coal is nuclear. And the capacity value on nuclear is usually north of 90%, so it's better than 90%. The coal fleet is around 83, 85%. So it's also highly dependable. And that's one of the things we like to brag on about the coal fleet. Combined cycle is about 74%. Wind is around 40%, and we get to solar, and that's less than 10%. That's about 8%. All right, the point there is a megawatt of coal is a lot better than a megawatt of gas, wind, or solar. All right, then the cost of these new renewables came from the National Renewable Energy Lab. That's a DOE lab, and Lazard, who's a financial analytical firm. The coal costs came from FERC. The coal prices came from EIA. EVA assumed maximum renewable tax credits. All right, which of course would tend to bias the results in favor of renewables. And natural gas prices, they average natural gas prices the month before and during the winter. This is one where people would argue about all day long where gas price is going to be. So those are some of the inputs into the analysis. All right, this is the report. The first bullet's what I was referring to. These are the coal retirements. EVA actually maintains our coal retirement database. And so they looked at a group of almost 42 gigawatts of coal that were retiring. And I think as Michelle said earlier, the findings, and I'll show you the numbers in a second, show that continuing to operate those 42 gigawatts of coal is a lot less expensive than replacing them with renewables. Now, one of the big caveats with the study is you can't quantify all the reliability attributes that coal provides that would not be provided if all this coal retires. For example, fuel security is one of the primary reliability attributes of coal. All right, so now we're going to get to the results. If you look down there at the bottom, This is the 42 gigawatts of coal that I referred to, 41.7. Then to replace the 42 gigawatts of coal, if you replaced them with wind backed up with batteries, you'd need 69 gigawatts of wind and batteries. I'm going to show you the breakdown on the next slide. Wind plus natural gas, and those are simple cycle gas turbines. You need about the same amount. You need about 70 gigawatts of that to replace 42 gigawatts of retiring coal. Then if you're only going to do wind, which I doubt anybody would do because you don't get wind in all parts of the country, that would require 86 gigawatts. Then you can see the numbers grow when you get into solar. And that has a lot to do with the capacity factors of solar, and it has low capacity factors of solar, and also the low capacity value of solar. All right, so if you have a hybrid system of solar with battery storage, that's 114 gigawatts to replace 42 gigawatts of coal. Solar backed up or firmed by natural gas, that's a little more, that's 117 gigawatts. And the solar only, again, that's kind of a theoretical number, but it's an interesting way to get people's attention. So if you're going to have the same amount, if you're going to generate the same amount of electricity as 42 gigawatts of coal, you'd need 560 gigawatts of solar. Now, the way EVA did the analysis, this will show you how it breaks out. So if you start at the top again, that's the same 560 gigawatts of solar. Then if you look at the one below that, the 70 is the amount of solar. Think of those as solar panels, and the 47 gigawatts is simple cycle gas turbines. And so you can read on down solar plus battery storage, that's 70 gigawatts of solar and 45 gigawatts of battery storage. So you can read the numbers on down. Again, those are the breakdown of the renewables plus the firming capacity. All right, the next slide. Now, this is the drum roll. This is how much this would cost. So to operate that 42 gigawatts of coal, the annual cost, the O&M on that would be about $6 billion a year.
Where are they getting this?
Excuse me? Sorry, I thought that was a question. Anyhow, you can see that the cost rise considerably. So these are annual costs in billions. Wind plus battery storage would be about $9 billion a year. Wind plus net firmed with natural gas would be $10 billion a year, 11. The numbers keep climbing from there. So there's a lot of math behind this. Like I said, if anybody's really, really curious about the math, we probably ought to kind of follow after this call. We've promoted these results pretty widely. They have gotten a fair amount of attention. I know Michelle has talked to a number of reporters about them. Michelle, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So reporters obviously have gotten a lot of analysis and reports, whether that's Grid Strategies or the Sierra Club. And so it was a good opportunity for us to try to get some balance to some of these reports that even the way they're presented is extremely misleading because obviously the devil is in the assumptions that you make. In a lot of these reports, we have been briefing state utility commissioners. We're going to present this report at the upcoming NARUC meeting. We did get a lot of positive comments from the administration because obviously it supports what they're trying to do. And we also have given this to all the FERC commissioners, staff, who also will be briefing as well. And so we had a lot of members in Kentucky. For whatever reason, the Sierra Club has funded some large analysis and studies. So we have widely distributed this and talked to a lot of the media in some of our coal-heavy states as well, like Kentucky.
Michelle, that was actually going to be one of my follow-up questions. I mean, what kind of response are you getting from the media? Because of course they've been fed this drumbeat for years and years that solar is now cheaper. Solar is now cheaper than everything else. And I mean, have they been open to the more granular analysis that you guys have offered here?
Yeah, they've definitely been more open. One of the hard things is they obviously, they don't have time to read the full the full report, and the math, like Paul said, it gets very complicated. And so what we've tried to do with them is, like the blog, the paper that went with this study, even these slides, we've tried to present it in a way that somebody who's not an engineer can understand it. But yeah, we have got some good comments. They really haven't attacked it, put it that way either. And we're hoping the administration is also using some of this information.
I know you guys have been talking to the media for years on these issues. Is the fact that media and other folks are being, I guess, forced to become more literate on how power grid systems work in the context of all this AI stuff? Is that helping us get the message across?
Yeah, it definitely is, because it's very hard. Yes, they can push back on the administration. They'll just say that's a Republican versus a Democratic issue. But, when you have people like Jim Robb and, the CEO of MISO, John Baer, and Manu, over at PJM, I mean, they're all saying obviously the same thing, and that, an attribute of coal, and you can say that of nuclear, is not the same as solar plus, battery storage. And so, to me, when reporters always ask me, oh, what's really changed, is it is demand. Demand has changed the whole conversation, and especially, the number one of the priorities of this administration is to win the AI race. And the only way that we think they can do that is with existing coal. Doesn't mean we're not going to have to build new generation. We all know that we are. But why not? We have coal plants that are running at 18% capacity factor. Why not run them at 80 to 90%? There's a lot of capacity that's available to serve those data centers. And we do feel like data centers, even though they're not going to publicly say, oh yeah, I'm going to co-locate next to a coal plant, there's a lot of conversations behind the scenes with utilities who say, well, we don't map molecules, we'll use our coal plant for these consumers over here.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm not that anybody still understands really how electricity is made or where it comes from. It seems like this data center conversation is forcing a little higher degree of energy literacy, at least on folks who write and read newspapers. So
I would totally agree. I mean, there's articles, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, every day, Washington Post.
Yeah, so hopefully that works to our advantage. So
we hope so.
Back to you, Paul.
I am through unless there's some questions.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, let's the charts are impressive because the knee-jerk headline that gets written on these stories when the Sierra Club reacts was this 202C order came out for that power plant and is going to force utility ratepayers to pay X millions of dollars more to keep that plant open. It seems like this is the analysis that points out that if you use that power plant and you actually generate electricity with it, it's quite the opposite conclusion. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a good way to think about this. Yep.
So, I got to go. The floor is open. Anybody else who's got questions, please feel free to type them in the chat there or unmute yourself and speak up. As you know, I've always got a couple. I'm just curious, Paul and Michelle, on your opinions. I mean, we lean a lot on Energy Information Administration, EIA government data for forecasts. But EIA is kind of notoriously slow. Are those EIA forecasts, do you think, keeping up with this kind of dynamic environment we're in, or are their forecasts lagging what you think is actually going to happen in terms of this energy demand?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, they have these, of course, they're, they do these projections. They have a model called NIMS. They do a lot of projections there. They're more kind of macro projections. I know every now and then they look at the accuracy of past predictions. I can't remember what they came up with the last time. So they're pretty transparent, usually about their projections. We use them for other things besides this EVA analysis. Um, so I'm not sure I'm answering your question, though, John.
Well, I think you're answering saying it's still good data. It's just a data point
Yeah,
that there are others out there that need to be taken into consideration, right?
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Absolutely. We use EIA and FERC data in a lot of cases just so nobody will accuse us of using some black box to come up with our own numbers. We're not saying in all cases EIA's projections are better than EVA actually does projections also
Right.
on gas prices and coal prices, which you probably know. It's just somebody else to point to, say it's an independent third party.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the folks on this call, particularly folks with utilities who are operating coal plants, who, if you backed up, even just a couple of 3 years ago, were operating under a paradigm that assumed plants were going to close on a schedule, and now that schedule is not the case. Um, you know, I think a lot of the questions that those power plant operators and coal consumers are grappling with is kind of two parts. One is, how durable do we think these regulatory changes are going to be? And if they are going to be durable, what additional things are we going to need to do to keep running a plant that we had assumed was going to close for a while? So I guess I shouldn't ask two questions at once, but I'll let you go ahead and react to that and see what you guys think.
Yeah, let me say something about the EPA rules. Michelle mentioned those. There are a number of pressures or challenges on the coal fleet. And Michelle and I kind of divided up. I tend to pay more attention to EPA, and Michelle pays more attention to, grid operators and that sort of thing. But I know something about grid operators, and she knows a lot about EPA rules. So the biggest problem with EPA rules is, of course, regulating carbon. And EPA has proposed to repeal endangerment finding, which is the basis for carbon regulations for stationary and mobile sources. We think that EPA will finalize the endangerment finding, the repeal of it, sometime. Well, Zeldin said something the other day. It sounded like it may be a little longer than we thought. But anyhow, long story short, is we expect EPA to jerk the rug out from under carbon regulation. That's a huge deal. Then there's 6 other rules. We're dealing with one wastewater rule, ELG right now. That's the only issue where we haven't gotten enough cooperation from the administration. But there's CCR, there's Mercury, there's regional haze. EPA is doing a lot of good stuff there. As Michelle said, we're going to be working with the attorneys general to defend these rules in court. I'm guessing there'll probably be 3 or 4 of those will be finalized this year. And so you know what happens. Everybody sues everybody, and we'll be defending those in court. And that's really will do a lot to determine how durable these revised rules will be. In the case of carbon, the rules would go away. So it's going to boil down to what the courts have to say about this. EPA's been pretty smart in some of their legal arguments. Some of them, EPA's kind of swinging for the fences. They're taking chances, but that's probably the right thing to do under the circumstances. So the EPA rules, we feel pretty good about those. What EPA will do, we're not sure what will happen in court, though. Obviously, we have a better Supreme Court right now than we've had in the past. Michelle, you want to talk about some of the other challenges?
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to the regulatory environment, and I'm sure many of the utilities, obviously state utility commissioners, I just had a call with the chairman of the Kentucky Commission yesterday. And I mean, this is they're all being blamed, for this affordability issue. But I also am finding that many of them are having to get a lot smarter, whether it's this analysis, because they've all got probably more dockets than they've ever had, whether that's transmission upgrades, new generation, I need to invest in my coal plant. But we do find that they are asking a lot of better questions. They also know that utilities need regulatory certainty. It's kind of a two-edged sword. In the wholesale markets, for those of you who engage in the wholesale markets, it takes a long time to change anything. Now, if the market reforms, and some of them that have been made around accreditation, I mean, they don't go far enough, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. I don't see them reversing a lot of that methodology to try to better accredit the dependability of a unit when you need it most. Obviously, this FERC is trying to speed up a lot of reforms, and obviously you all saw what was announced in PJM as it relates, to the governors and trying to speed up and hold auctions, which PJM obviously typically doesn't do auctions for generation because they run a wholesale market, a lot of merchant generation. But I think as I've seen, just thinking about the last 5 years, it's very hard to whether that's an EPA regulation or whether that's a regulation, whether it's something coming from DOE or FERC, it's hard to argue with the math and the science and the reality. And I think there's been a big wake-up call. A lot of people just haven't been realistic, especially with all this demand growth. And so I think the outlook for coal, and I'm not saying there's still not a lot of challenges for coal, but I think the outlook is much better. And, we are seeing utilities who have made it very loud and clear to the Department of Energy and the administration that, hey, if you want me to take this grant and invest in this coal plant, I need some longer term regulatory certainty. And I know they are, they do understand. They've heard, from many across the coal supply chain, especially the utilities, that they need additional reforms. And so we're hoping that, that's what we're going to see in the next 3 years.
I think we can all agree that the first year of the second Trump administration has moved with lightning speed in Washington, D.C. terms in queuing up a lot of these new regulatory reforms and so forth. Paul mentioned the inevitable litigation that's gonna play out. I mean, have they, by moving so fast and getting everything in the pipeline this early in the administration, do you think it can all be wrapped up in this administration, or do the Republicans need to win the White House one more time to make all this stuff really stick?
Well, they started out. We continue to be impressed by what EPA is doing, other than this wastewater rule that I mentioned, ELG. One of the reasons, John, you touched on, they were trying to move so fast is because they wanted to, get all the litigation handled during this administration. They're slowing down some now. I think it kind of, it makes it less certain that they'll be able to complete all this litigation, during this Trump administration. Some of it may carry over in the next administration. So, we go through these political cycles that have a huge impact on policies, like every 2 years, obviously for Congress, and then you got 4 years for the president. So it always comes down to politics.
Kind of a conundrum, isn't it? I was actually, you mentioned how EPA is slowing down on a few of the things. For instance, the greenhouse gas, the endangerment finding repeal. They appear to be taking a little bit of a step back to clean that up. But then you get a headline in the obviously leaning to the left Washington Post that says, well, EPA slowing down on this stuff is probably a bad thing for environmentalists because EPA is doing a better job of making sure that these things are defensible in court, right? So
right.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
But definitely a big difference from the first Trump administration. Totally agree with you.
Light and day, right? Light and day.
Yeah.
That's why we all got big circles under our eyes, just trying to keep up. They're moving like that. We're gonna wrap it up a little early here, cats and kittens. But you know, if you have any questions you'd like to insert, jump in there. I just got one more that I want to throw out there. I mean, Michelle, you used the term wake up call, and you know, half of the country or so forth is getting plunged into a polar vortex again now. I mean, is it, you know, do you think the momentum now is sufficient to get these reforms done, or do we, or is it going to take some kind of a terrible disaster attached to a polar vortex or something to really motivate action on getting this done?
I mean, obviously, we're all watching the storm. You know, there's a lot of regions that obviously PJM, ERCOT that are, you know, razor thin reserve margins. And so certainly when we had it, it obviously will create a lot of attention for policymakers. And again, but you'll have everybody pointing fingers at whose fault it was, you know, whether it's the utilities' fault or it's FERC's fault or it's PJM's fault or it's the governor's fault, which we always see. But I guess I'm more optimistic because, you know, I remember when we had a meeting with Jim Robb and one of our members said it was when, you know, President Trump came out with the emergency executive order, energy emergency. And he said, you know, hey, somebody asked him about that. And he said, you know, hey, obviously they want to be fuel neutral and they don't want to get involved in politics. But he said, I'll tell everybody in the room right now, we have an emergency energy crisis right now. He said, just read our reports and look at our information. We already have the crisis. We don't need it to get any worse. So I guess I'm more optimistic because we still have a lot of challenges as it relates to ensuring reliable and certainly affordable electricity.
Well, we very much appreciate the great work that you and Paul do over there, Michelle, at America's Power. You know, they are, you know, for those of you who aren't familiar with the group, they are extremely active. They're extremely well connected at the federal level and also in a number of the key states where this policy is moving. We very much appreciate all the work that you're doing over there, and thank you for taking the time today to share the results of this EVA analysis, which is you know, another nice arrow in the quiver to have out there. So thank you again very much for taking the time. Just do a real quick commercial. Want to let everybody know that the registration is open. Melinda has been pushing out some emails, and then we'll also have registration links in tomorrow's On-Track newsletter. But registration is open for the operations and maintenance and spring conferences coming up April 20th to 23rd in Jekyll Island. Beautiful location. I think there's going to be some golf. O&M conference will go first. Spring conference will come second. They'll overlap in the middle, so you'll have you know, two social event opportunities for the attendees of both conferences to do some networking, and of course, the golf benefiting the Scholarship Foundation. It's a beautiful venue down there in Jekyll Island. The speaker rosters are, I would say, probably 75% complete, so you can review those on the website. But we've got a great set of speakers lined up, and hope to see everybody in Jekyll Island in April. Sponsorship opportunities available as well. Feel free to get a hold of Melinda and get your sponsorship lined up, and really appreciate that. For On Track Live next month, we're going to have Stuart Burgess from Burgex Mining Consultants. Stuart's done a lot of work on another hot issue in today's AI world, critical minerals recovery. And Stuart's been doing a lot of work in the field of critical minerals recovery, both from coal resources and coal byproducts. And he's going to give us an overview of the potential viability of those strategies and the importance that they have to national security and, of course, the Trump administration.